What's going on, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. Today, I have Nicole Bush with me, and she is the press officer for AHR Expo. AHR Expo is a expo for HVACR professionals. Essentially, what we're talking about here is like heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, and a lot of manufacturers, a lot of suppliers, and a lot of end users of those. Nicole, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So, Nicole, your title, AHR Expo Press Officer, is a really cool title that kind of caught me. And then when we started talking, it's got even more interesting when I learned what it is that you do for the AHR Expo. And just so we're setting this conversation up right, AHR is an association and they run a massive annual trade show, conference, event, whatever you feel like calling it. Okay. So, Nicole, tell me a little bit about AHR if you want, but really what I'm more interested in is tell me about your role and what you're doing for AHR.
Sure. You are exactly right. We are actually an organization, an organizer of North America's largest trade show serving the HVAC and refrigeration industry. The show's been around since 1930, so it's gone through quite a few changes, as you can imagine, but really started with the birth of expositions as what we know them today, or what we've come to know them through the years, where you see products on the show floor, you gather a lot of people in the same spot, and everybody's looking to learn and grow and network. So it's really nice to have that rooted tradition and watch it evolve and grow through the years. So yes, my, technical title would be press officer, but beyond that, it really is a communications director, connector, because my audience certainly extends beyond the media or the press. The audience really is encompassing of all of our shareholders. So that is our media, of course, but it also is our attendees who come to our event every year. It is the associations that we work with in partnership, and it is the exhibitors who show up to put the products and technology on the show floor.
Love that. So that's a good broad stroke that we're going to now dive into a little bit here, because I think what's cool about what you do and what we discussed, you just use the word connector, which is cool, right? That's part of what you do. And when people go to big conferences and trade shows, they're looking to what? They're looking to connect, right? The exhibitors want to connect, the attendees want to connect, everybody's looking to connect, network, build relationships. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing specifically, where you're driving more value. For the two main components of a trade show, in my opinion, are the exhibitor, sponsor, and then the attendee. So what are you doing specifically to drive more value to them at AHR?
One of the things that I do specifically in my role is trying to bridge the gap in those early conversations. Our trade show is a 3-day event. There are some conference activities that happen with one of our co-sponsors ahead of that. So that's about a week. And then, of course, there are events that are happening all throughout that are hosted by sponsors or hosted by associations. But really, people are here to do business. And business can look like growing your professional network. It can look like buying or selling a product. It can look like just a knowledge sharing opportunity. But a lot of that I find happens, if you haven't laid the groundwork ahead of the show, you have so many missed opportunities just laying on the table. So what I try to do in my role is initiate some of those early conversations based on trends that I see happening in the industry, conversations that I've had with our exhibitors as to what it is they're doing in their specific areas of the industry. One of the interesting things that happens with the particular show that I work on is we speak to so many different attendee audiences. We speak to engineers, we speak to distributors, supply chain, middlemen, and then we speak to the technicians and contractors and people who are actually in the homes of the end user making sales of equipment. So you can imagine the conversation spans in so many different areas. And sometimes there's something very specific that all of our shareholder audiences will be interested in talking about, obviously at wherever they are along the supply chain. But beyond there are so many niche conversations that our exhibitors are looking to have with a very specific type of attendee. So I spend a lot of time on the phone with our exhibitors and also on the phone with our attendees. We have a huge involvement, engagement, social media presence. Over the years, I've developed personal relationships, professional personal relationships with a lot of our people who have come to our show
Mm.
several times. And I've met them in person and then carried on through social media. And I'll reach out and I'll say, what does your day look like? What are the pain points that you're experiencing that you're looking to solve problems or issues? And it can be something that you're aware of their solution out there, or you're just kind of band-aiding it because you haven't found a solution yet. And then trying to compare those two streams of conversations and putting things in our education programming, putting things in our podcast pavilion or in our podcast group, speaking to the media to see what it is that they might be covering or looking to cover that falls within those conversation topics. And kind of laying the groundwork so that when you actually arrive at the trade show and you have, let's say a week, 3 days of that spent inside our show, you can kind of cut all the introductory clutter and you can literally get right to business. And I think that has been helpful in so many ways for so many of our audiences.
I think I like a couple of things you said there. Like, when you were talking about like why people are there, from buying and selling to growing their network to just a various array of things. Your expo reminds me of a lot of major expos in terms of like the facets and the factors, suppliers, manufacturers. There's a lot of different pieces and what people are doing. So it's very difficult to please all, right? What you said about the groundwork, I love that, right? Like laying groundwork and knowing what it looks like prior getting there. The question you said, what does your day look like? Right? I mean, that's excellent as well. And I think everything you're telling me is essentially trying to increase the validity, the value, the experience of the event so that people are not questioning like, hey, do we go to AHR? Is this a good expo? Does it bring us value? Does it not? So that kind of brings us to what I want to talk about next, which is like the evolution of trade shows. And I have been beating this drum. I've been saying this for a while now. I think that things have changed. A lot of people that were used to pre-COVID and the way things were, that great run from 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 they're used to just the way things were, and things have changed. The value that trade shows drive are different than what it used to be because of the rise of digital and a bunch of other things.
Right.
So that being said, that's just my opinion, but that being said, what are you doing? What is AHR doing? What have you seen other organizers and associations doing? What's going on that side, the association organizer side, to evolve and make trade shows win-win for everybody going?
Well, I think, a big part of it is just recognizing and accepting and acknowledging what a trade show is. We all know the traditional aspects of a trade show, and the benefit to those, they've been proven. Again, we're here since 1930. We've had a successful show most of those years since.
Yeah.
You're going to see products on the floor. You're going to have an opportunity to meet with a community that you don't see, every day, certainly, but maybe not even often. We're a once a year show. So you have the opportunity to really kind of catch up in person. That in-person experience is something that is unmatched. I mean, I think we all lived through COVID and we all had Zoom fatigue. And while the digital side of things certainly adds a convenience factor, one of the things that I've seen since we've been back in person and on the floor is you cannot replicate that in-person networking experience in the same way. You can facilitate it. So I think, just recognizing and appreciating the traditional sense of a trade show is number one. And maybe, like you said, we were on this run for so many years that companies were going to events, they were throwing large marketing budgets and not really questioning it because you just had done that for a while. I mean, around 2007, 2008, with the market crash, people kind of evaluated, but then they swung back. And then this time we had like an actual standstill. And we came back the first year we were back. We had some skeleton crews inside the exhibitor spaces because, people were traveling the same way. Obviously, we have an international audience that had some difficulties coming. So just finding the real appreciation of, taking a second and deeper look at what we really are doing when we get together in the in-person space. So that's the first part. And then to answer the second part of your question is how are they evolving? For so many years, and before I worked on the inside, where I was actually a part of the organizing team with the trade show, I worked for companies in a public relations capacity, supporting them at the show. So I was inside the booth. Sometimes that would be, 5 to 10 different clients at one particular trade show. And you always kind of looked at the organizers of the trade show as just that. They were not necessarily active members of the industry you were in or the community that you were in, because they might have put on, a handful of shows throughout the year. And they kind of hovered around their expertise being the logistics of putting together a trade show. I can't speak to what other associations or trade shows are doing, but I have seen a change in the successful shows that I think where you're actually becoming a valued member of the community. You're recognizing that you have a shared interest in the industries that you serve, to the attendees that you bring in, and to the exhibitors that are on your show floor. And you're taking time to understand what the industry looks like, what people are going through, what the supply chain is looking like, what those trending topics are going to be, and trying to forecast, because, our show happens at the beginning of the year. So we're trying to forecast where you can come and you can do, some early digging and early planning so that your year ahead, hopefully, you can look at it with a clearer lens and you can make business decisions that are smarter and more profitable and, whatever that might look for you. So the people that I see, the organizers that I see that are really kind of standing the test of time and embracing this evolution of the in-person experience, are becoming a deeper part of the community. They're not
Mm.
just organizing a trade show and walking away the day that the doors open and saying, okay, well, our work is done. Everyone's here now, do what you do. My job, for example, we're already working on shows that are years out from now. When I arrive at the show, that's my busiest time because I'm hitting the ground
Yeah.
running, talking to people,
Hmm.
observing what's happening inside our exhibitor booths, observing what conversations are happening in the education programming or the conference side of things. Because that's all going to play out into what the next show looks like and the contacts that you make and the people that you look to reach out to. So I think, long answer there, but I think it's really important that you differentiate yourself from just being an organizer of the show and recognizing the interest and the stake that you have in the industries that you
Hmm.
serve.
I think that was great. Like one of the things I really took, well, I took a few things from what you said, but one of the things I took that you said was this concept of, you quote saying like becoming a deeper part of the community, the organizer, the association becoming a deeper part of the community.
Mhm.
And I think that is fundamentally something that has to happen
Right.
because communities are becoming a thing versus they
Huge.
weren't really a thing in 2014, 13. They
Exactly.
just weren't. But now with Discord, Facebook groups,
Mhm.
podcasts, the kind of the way social media has evolved and then everything being added into it, communities are big. People want to feel that they're a part of something, not showing up to something and paying just to be there.
Right.
So
Exactly.
if the organizer association can make themselves a part of that, then the thinking almost automatically becomes what you just kind of recited, which is like, hey, we're all here for business initiatives. Everybody here is here for some form of business initiative. Everybody has a goal, something attached to what we're doing. So like, if we're setting this whole thing up, let's try to set it up so that it works. And it's never going to be perfect, but listening to people, observing on the show floor, understanding and being able to adapt for those people, I think is huge. And I really love that quote, being a deeper part of the community. It's really
Yeah.
good.
It's so true. You're exactly right. I mean, we see, a big thing that has happened in our particular industry is we have so many different shareholder audiences that don't necessarily communicate. You have the engineering staff who's designing and the architects who are designing. And then you have, the contractors who are actually in the homes.
Yep.
And one of the conversation topics we have is, one group sets all these regulations and specifications for how equipment can perform. And the other group is kind of on the hook to install it correctly, to make it perform that way. But all of those
Yeah.
conversation opportunities along the chain are missed. And you're not going to have point A matching point B if you
Mhm.
haven't had that community aspect where you have open channels of communication to have those two-way conversations. And that's one of the things that we as an event serving this industry can facilitate, and making sure that there's opportunity not only on the 3 days that you come to the show, but on our social channels or in our forums and the podcasts that we participate in, where those conversations can happen and people can hear them and dive into them.
That makes me think. I recently had a cool conversation with a guy named Sam Zelich, and he works for Squarespace in Manhattan. Squarespace, a big brand, and he's a community manager for them. They have their own community of designers, and he runs multiple virtual events and then also their own in-house events and things of that nature. But he said something kind of in line of what you were just made me think the same thing. He talked about like interpersonal connections and relationships at events. Because him and I were talking like how to better events. And I was saying like, one of my favorite things about the events is these conversations. Like you're mentioning, you have manufacturers, you have installers, you have sellers, you have resellers, you have middle people, there's so many different people, and the industries in most are vast. How can we set up these in-person events? Because having a conversation virtually one-on-one is great. And I think you can really go deep with people, but in group setting, it's tough. It can only go so far. But just imagine if you had all those that interpersonal connection in a room with 20, 30 people and talking about, hey, I'm an installer and like, this is an issue that I have and then everybody starts, they're industry topics that are happening every day that people struggle with. That's what people want to talk about. And that creates connection.
Yeah. Exactly. They want access. I use that term a lot when I'm communicating.
Yeah, that's a good term. Yeah.
Gaining access to, audiences that you don't necessarily have access to, information that you don't have easy access to. If you are an installer, you can call a manufacturer and they can send you a guide. But one of the things that we hear time and time again is, the language is not always the same. There's very technical information, and then there's, practical explanation to customers and such that. So, there really is so much opportunity as a community and as a person such as myself in the role that I sit in making those connections and kind of facilitating, breaking down some of those barriers so that the industry as a whole can thrive and everybody benefits when the industry is doing great.
Yeah. What are you doing right now? What are you striving for in terms of bettering, like specifically, any specifics that you can share that you are looking to better the experience for the exhibitors and the attendees? What are you working on? Sponsors, even, the sponsor conversation is a big one as well.
Yes. Well, one of the things that we've been developing over the last couple of years is we have a conference program and education programming that's free for our attendees. And I think, historically, there's been a particular, attendee type that is more interested in the conference side as opposed to just being on the trade show or, other activities that are happening. So really kind of taking a deeper examination of what some of our audiences who don't necessarily take advantage of that part of the show would be looking for, what the value for them may be. And maybe it's continuing education or what have you. And then making that connection back to the show floor so our exhibitors can be a part of that conversation too. So one of the things that we have done in the last couple of years is develop a streamlined panel series. And it's really, we do a trend report every year. We release a couple months ahead of the show where we've spoken to our associations, our endorsing associations, but also to members of our exhibitor members from the show floor and members from our attendee audience. And we're literally just asking the questions like, what conversations are your members having right now? What conversations are you having in the break room right now? Why are you calling an exhibitor's helpline? Like what problems are going on? And we're dumping all of that in. And then we're taking a look at all of that information and we're pulling out these common themes that we see are happening across all of our shareholder audiences. And then we're really finding the professionals in our industry who are the leaders, the experts, the people who were early adopters of that topic, people who are making moves in that area. And we're putting them together, and they probably would never be on stage together in a lot of these scenarios. Maybe they would be doing an individual talk. Maybe they would be doing a session on their own, or they would be talking inside their booth about it, but they wouldn't be having that sort of discord on stage in real time with people that they don't encounter in their day-to-day. that's been amazing for us. And sometimes it walks away and you're like, whoops, there's a little tension in there. But to
I like
me,
that.
yeah, that is
I
a
like that.
benefit because there's so many of these conversations that they're not fun conversations and they're real problems that need to be solved. And where do you start? One example that we did this year was we had several of them. One of them was social media and the community aspect of HVAC. Like, because we have so many of these people who are, they're doing YouTube tutorials of installs and they're doing, they're building the community feel. But what I walked away with that was so interesting is the amount of manufacturers who came into that session and sat and were speaking directly one to one with these people. These people on stage, they're working in the field every single day. And the questions were, how can we support you more with, like our call lines, or what materials do you need? And for me, that seems like it would be such an obvious, but obviously there was no direct line of communication for that. And they're really striving and looking to kind of tighten those lines of the way that they work together. And, that conversation, we had no barriers for what it needed to be or what it should be. But, it got a little heated in the best way, I think, because you had people sitting on the stage who are frustrated at times. And then you had people sitting in the audience who had a desire to fix that frustration, but nowhere was there a
Mhm.
platform or a forum to kind of lay it out on the table. So we've been having a lot of those kinds of conversations and building out this panel series very successfully. I mean, this year we had booked a room for 250 and we probably doubled that in the scans that we took. There was standing
Nice.
room, turning away people. So anytime you could put like something like that on the agenda and so many people show up and so many people participate. I mean, they were just at one point shouting questions from the audience and it was a little chaotic, but
That's good.
again, yeah, it
That's
shows you
good.
that there is a thirst for that and there's a hunger for those conversations and we need to have them even if they kind of get a little tense.
I love that. I mean, when you said streamlined panel series, that to me is interpersonal relation. You can't do that virtually. You just can't. You,
No,
you you
you
can't
can't.
get the feel of the room. When you said that things got tense, you can't feel that virtually.
Right.
I've been in rooms like that. And I love it. It's because when people will speak their minds, I also believe when you have the right people in the room, it's when problems will get solved.
Yes,
And when you talk
exactly.
about connection, it's like you never know who left there and then which manufacturer walked over to one of them and said, hey, let's get together next week or next month and
Right.
let's start solving this issue for you, or for like, so much cool stuff happens in those situations. And you're just orchestrating. You're just saying, hey, we're driving value, right? We're trying to drive value and experience to everybody that is paying and showing up to be here for a couple of days.
Right.
And what it makes me think of is I have a friend of mine and he's kind of like a business coach, mentor, and he has this great line. He says that like he doesn't know anybody that wakes up every day and says, I want to suck, right? Like
Yep.
professionally, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like nobody shows up to work every day as like, you know what? I want to suck at this
He's
today.
do a
Like
good job today.
most
Right.
people, yeah, most people are really trying to be good at something. And when
Right.
you do love your industry, and I go to my industry events, I know in that room, those people in there are trying. Some
Mm.
are just better than others. Some are smarter. Some are more crafty. Everybody's different, but no one's trying to suck. So when you get people in a room and they can ask questions and collaborate and talk and have honest conversations rather than these like beat around the bush.
Mhm.
Oh my God, some of the panel stuff I've seen, it's like, this is the most staged bunch
Yeah.
of garbage I've ever seen in my life. Right. But when you have
Right.
these real authentic, you're calling them like a streamlined panel series. I love that. What a
Yeah.
cool aspect to add into the events.
Yeah. And it's
Nice.
wonderful. So hopefully we'll keep growing that.
Talk to me a little bit about sponsors, pleasing them, giving them value, like I've heard this a lot. I've had this conversation about like the other side. I had it virtually, like where people are having issues giving their sponsors virtual value. Right.
Right.
But then in person, I know is changing. We're actually going through it right now. We're going to a trade show in 30 days. And a lot of the sponsorship opportunities, I was like, meh, just, I don't know.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing? What do you see? What's on your side?
Well, I'll
What's
start by
happening there?
saying We actually do not. I mean, I've been to a lot of events where you're using a napkin that's got a logo on it. You're like, oh gosh. So we keep our sponsorship opportunities, very limited because again, like you just hit on there, there's value and then there's just taking people's money. And
Yes.
we don't do that. We want to keep the show focused on the experience for everybody, for the exhibitors, for the attendees. And,
Yeah.
everyone needs to walk away feeling like they had a credible experience. Nothing was, like you said, just superficial. We're not feeding you BS because someone wrote us a big check. We're never getting into that game. And what's great is we built an event where we don't feel the need to do that. But what
Good.
we are doing for our sponsorship opportunities is we are trying again to connect back to what is the biggest benefit for the industry and in return, the attendees, the exhibitors, everyone in the community. So we've built our sponsorships around some of the programs that we're doing. We have one program that we run every year. We've just started it within the last couple cycles. It's called the workforce development. One of the topics that we have every single year that's burning a hole through everyone's conversation roster is recruiting people into the industry. And this is at every level. I think, we could have a whole side conversation on what the younger professionals coming into the industry value and what they're
Yeah.
looking for as a return in their career. And as a result of that, well, particularly in our industry, you can be an engineer, you can have an MBA and be a salesperson or a CEO or C-suite. You can go to tech school, vocational school. We've had this narrative around, you have to go to a 4-year traditional college or there's no value in your education as a society for so long. And obviously we're in an industry where that's not the case, not at all. So kind of changing the narrative and recruiting people who are interested and can see the possibility, they can see the global impacts, they can see the return to, society as a whole that HVAC can be. It can be very rewarding. I mean, we're talking about climate, change. We're talking about decarbonization. We're talking about, indoor air quality of life, health benefits. I mean, literally we touch everything. So we have taken on a workforce development program where we bring in students. The last couple cycles, it's been at the high school level. They work in dual credit programs. We have engineering students who are going to be mechanical engineers and students who are training to be technicians. And we've built an experience for them at the show. And it's really to kind of show them what the industry looks like in its most shining moment and the opportunity, because you can talk to someone who maybe started out in the same position you are and now they're in a C-suite. Or maybe they're a marketing director or whatever your interests are, you can see
Yeah.
yourself in our industry. So we've built a sponsorship opportunity around that because we have a lot of our exhibitors who are looking to give back in the same regard, or they're doing similar things inside their own, organizations. And that has been a very popular one. We try to focus on, gaining exposure, of course, for your company, but also connecting that to an industry positive. So that's been a big one.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to
Yeah,
say
go
something
ahead.
about that one because I think that's such a good one because my industry has the same problem, the workforce problem. We're always looking for
Mhm.
carpenters. We're always looking, there's certain things there, labor on the trade show floor, the
Mhm.
event floor, like all kinds in the same space as, your industry to a degree,
Right.
right? And workforce is a constant discussion. I think it's interesting that you guys have taken an industry problem
Mhm.
and said, hey, we're going to drive value to that problem in a
Exactly.
sponsorship setting, because now you're saying, okay, our sponsors have this problem. This is a problem that they have. So rather than offering them, I don't know, a logo on a napkin
Yep.
or to sponsor a lunch where they get a 8x11 sheet that says their name and then
Exactly.
lunch just happens and nobody cares, we're going to help them with a
Right.
problem. I think that's really cool. That's
It's a
good. What
twofold.
else?
And,
Yep.
that's kind of where it is. It's twofold. You really want to, we're always kind of looking to how you can really kind of exhaust the resource. And that's been a good one. We do have some traditional sponsors, of course, but again, very limited. Podcast Pavilion, podcasting, as you touched on earlier, is huge. And I
Yeah.
think the whole industry is experiencing a lack of the podcast boom. So we too have that, and we formalize that
Nice.
in the show with the podcast staging area. We have 2
Pavilion.
pavilions where we bring in industry podcasters, as a form of media, but separate from the media. people who are working out in the field, but they also have a podcast where they're talking to real members of the industry. And, they're kind of looking to have some of those micro conversations to supplement some of the bigger conversations that are happening. So that's a sponsorship opportunity that we have as well. We run that sponsorship very, it's not like bells and whistles where your name's going to be up in lights. It's
Yeah.
just sort of integrated into what's already happening. We have a digital screen where now playing and whatever the podcast is. And then one of the cycles through would be the logo of the sponsor. But we also, give them an opportunity to participate in some, other ways. If they wanted to, they could work with the podcaster directly to put bottles or something in there if they wanted. That would be up to them. But again, it's all everything that we're doing with sponsorships is kind of strategic in how can we do it in such a way that it is adding value and it's not just stuff in your face. Plenty of that's happening inside the booths too. Everyone goes to trade shows, you have swag. You get your
A
hats or
lot of
your
it.
water bottles and all that's great. I
A lot
love
of
it. But as the organizer of the show, we kind of have an opportunity to look at the broader picture and see where value can be added.
I like those. Those are two really good examples that you just gave there because it is a conversation that comes up all the time. People, even in some marketing groups that I'm in and, things like that, I hear people talking about, hey, what do you sponsor? Which one do you, all these things for the events. And I'm always like, hey, there's no magic bullet, right? Number one, there's no magic bullet.
Well, it's
And
knowing your
two,
audience and where they are. We
What
have
fits.
some news opportunities, on our, if you log into our website, when you do our exhibitor searching, there's some leaderboard positions for banner ads and, the traditional type of sponsorships. But, we really kind of encourage our exhibitors to, know your audiences and look where they are spending their time or, and that is the sponsorship that's right for you. So, and we have a lot of success with those traditional ones too. I don't want to knock traditional sponsorships.
No, there's some good ones. Yeah.
Obviously they work. And if you're, doing the marketing correctly and you're targeting your audience in a smart way, then, having your banner in an e-newsletter is very effective and it probably will add them to, they'll add you to their calendar as a stop. So there's a lot of good in those as well.
What are your thoughts on in sponsorships when events, big trade shows have education programs where essentially sponsors are paying to teach those education programs because the people that are being educated are their potential prospects?
Right. That's a tough
How
question.
much of that have you seen? And outside of that, where's I don't mind if really, it happens in my industry, but I actually don't mind it in mine all that much because I think a lot of the companies, maybe say a company like myself would teach, an event marketer class, but frankly, most of the people that are teaching it really know some stuff that these event marketers should know. So I'm kind of all for it because I think the education is the key piece, but I've been to some events where it's just a pitch. The whole thing is a pitch. It's not really education to me. So for me, the fine line is are you pitching or are you educating? Right.
That's the credibility part. On it. Right. Yeah. You don't want to lose. That's a tough one. Excuse me. Because, like I said earlier, the second you kind of allow yourself to shy away from the credibility of your event, even if it's one misled pitch education session that, a handful of attendees came, you've just opened up a whole Pandora's box for word of mouth or discrediting what your event is. And, you don't want to do that. We don't have sponsorships of our education programming. What we do have is we have endorsing associations that we work with. Obviously, there's a vetting process to make sure that the endorsing association actually is relevant to the industry in some way, shape, or form. And we open that up and we allow our endorsing associations to put forth suggested education topics. And a lot of those do play very specifically to an application or a discipline. And they're led by people who probably are on the exhibit floor, probably have a product that solves the issue they're talking about or what have you. But I think the key, just speaking outside of my trade show and speaking as an industry, the key to doing this either both ways or intermixing it is just to have transparency. You shouldn't be looking to, or even as a marketer, I'm a marketer by trade, obviously. Never do I want to be in a situation where I feel like I'm hoodwinking someone. So having transparency and understanding that, yes, I'm going to give you all of the educational value that you can walk away and you can apply to anything you're doing in your own professional life. But at the end of this, I'm going to give you a pitch because I have the time, I have the attention. I think I probably wouldn't be too mad about that if I were a member of the audience because you have given me a lot of insider information. You've given me tools that you don't necessarily have to give. So I can listen
Yeah.
to your pitch and make an informed decision, knowing that everything that came ahead of that, you weren't trying to sell me something. So I think that's probably would be number one. Everybody
Yeah.
you can smell bad marketing from a mile away. We
Or a
see it
bad
every
pitch.
day on our computer screens and our
Yeah.
emails. We're marketing at constantly. We see it everywhere. So you kind of know the people who are really kind of in it to give you something beneficial
Yeah,
and
I
someone
agree.
that are just selling you something. So if you care about your audience and you care enough to give them transparency in what you're going to be sharing with them, I think that you can do it very successfully.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with you there. What what kind of issues are organizers and associations who are putting on large conference trade shows? What kind of issues are they facing right now?
Well, obviously, COVID is still, while it's nothing that it was 3 years ago. And this year, I'm very happy to say, in planning what was our 2023 event, because it already happened in February, I didn't hear that word too much, which was great.
Good.
But there's still considerations with that. I mean, you have some logistical things. The supply chain is still immense. You probably experience that in building exhibits.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So you have to kind of get
Yeah.
creative. We try to be very forthcoming and, ahead of telling our exhibitors to plan ahead, order early, have contingency plans, make sure you're connecting, even all the way through the supply chain. The trucking industry has experienced some issues with being able to man their trucks. So shipping takes longer.
Yeah.
Everything is just taking longer. Us for our printing processes, we had to shift, kind of pivot a little bit on some of our, which was great. It gave us an opportunity to kind of evaluate materials and things that we had just been doing because it had worked for us, but we couldn't get a certain type of material that we typically would use. So, you kind of have to think
Yeah.
about it far in advance. So that's definitely just the logistical side of it. There's been some hiccups there. And then I would say looking at, just there is, I wouldn't say hesitation in people traveling anymore, but you're looking at, the cities as a whole, what they have going on, what they've had restaurants that have shut down. They haven't had events for, or at least not in the same capacity for several or for a couple cycles at this point. So you have to kind of look at your attendee and your exhibitor, everyone who's going to be in town for your show specifically. You have to look at their experience as a whole. And, are there enough restaurants to accommodate? Are the hotels available for them? Are there, transportation available in the city? And we haven't had much issue this past year, but, that was something to think about in the prior year. So that's something. And then I think, I don't know if this is a problem or a good thing, but no shortage, at least in my industry, of problems to solve. Everyone, was talking about indoor air quality and retrofitting systems and,
Yeah.
there's a lot of other topics going on. So getting people in the room to talk about those things and to have enough time to talk about them, that's something that it kind of feels a lot more pressing in the last couple
Yeah.
of years.
Nice. Let's shift over to the exhibitors here, right? Because they're a huge piece of these large conferences.
Yeah.
I find a lot of exhibitors are under-resourced, underpowered, not enough knowledge, not a lot of support, yada, 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 right? What what are some resources that you can cue some exhibitors or anybody that gets thrown a trade show program who's, listening to this? How can they utilize their organizer, their association to get better results at their trade shows, or maybe not just better results, but just make things go smoother or
Yeah.
better results?
Well, I would say number one is pay attention earlier, wake up earlier. And I worked again on the other side of this where I've, had a client or a handful of clients and, they're doing multiple events a year. So it's not unnatural to not think about an event until it's the next event in your
Yeah.
agenda. But I think if you do that, you have really missed an opportunity to enhance what your show experience is going to be. I kind of cringe in the week or 2 weeks leading up to the show because I start getting so many emails in my inbox, and it's simple things like asking for the pre-registered media list or asking
Yep.
for an opportunity to do a podcast. And, the answer in short is, okay, well, here it is. But these appointments have probably been booked for months. I don't facilitate them. That goes directly to the media, but you've already missed out so much. So I think that's number one. It's just, kind of, and maybe it takes a few cycles, a few years to kind of get your, like you said, resource or team or whatever support you have. But you really need to work yourself into a habit of being a couple shows behind. And that's what you're working on. So that you really are kind of taking advantage of everything that's available. For our show specifically, for our exhibitors, we do so much, and so much of it is free. We have a full exhibitors toolbox marketing resource page available at the beginning of every cycle. It's things like, free customized postcards that you can mail out to your sales channels. It's customized emails, videos, you name it. It's free marketing tools. And it really is in the vein of understanding that we have obviously very big corporations that come to the show, and maybe they have a full stocked marketing team who are doing these things on their own. But we have others who are startups or new to the industry or have a very small crew, and they might not have the access to that marketing resource. So it's
Yeah.
really available for everybody, but you
It's
have
a
to
big
have
spread.
time, yeah, for it to be
Mhm.
effective. If I'm an attendee and I get a postcard for a trade show a week before and I'm going to have to travel for it, that's probably going to be hard to do. But if I got
What,
it, a month or two in advance, I could do that. So that's
why do you
probably number
think,
one.
what, yeah, on that one, why do you think exhibitors, like it is an industry wide problem
Mhm.
that they are so late on everything? I mean, as an exhibit and event company that is designing, helping them strategize, and then fabricating their exhibits and event spaces, I mean, the number of inquiries that we get in under 30 days to the event, it's unbelievable.
Crazy.
It's like sometimes they come to, my inbox, our lead gen space, and I just laugh. I'm like, this is nuts. I said, I don't even know, like, what they're asking for
Mhm.
can't even be built. So like, we've always seen it from our side, but as an exhibit builder, event builder, you're just like, oh, that's the nature of it. But now hearing, okay, from the association side, you have people asking for things
Oh,
a
yeah.
week before that
Yeah.
they should have asked for 3 months ago. So
Yeah.
do you have any, yeah, I guess I'm curious. Do you have any idea why? Do you know why?
Well, I will say there are a lot of, for every person or every company that's kind of skidding on the brakes there at the end. There's a ton of them that are doing it, and they're being very mindful in their
Yeah.
showcase. And I don't know if that's just culture inside the company or that, like you said, they've got the resource. I don't know that I have a why. I really think it just comes down to, you know, if you're one person or two-person marketing team and sometimes things don't make their way from the top down, or the
Yeah.
people who are
Yep.
communicating that you're going to go to this event don't understand what goes into actually putting on an event. So they're not
Mhm.
thinking about giving you the time to make sure you can do that. I think there's probably, it's not like a one size fits all. I think there's a lot of things. I do think there's still some kind of recovery from people who were learning to do their jobs differently in the last few
Yeah.
years, kind of pivoting. Not to say this stuff didn't happen prior to any of that, but maybe I've seen a little uptick in that since then. And I think it's just, again, you look at your calendar and you see something that, let's say you book this event now for next year. Our next show is at the end of January in 2024. You think you have time, and then you get busy, and then it's summer, and then it's the holidays, and then someone goes on vacation that's on your team. So you move the meeting another week, or someone,
Yep.
didn't take responsibility, or they did, but then they didn't, move the needle as much as they should have. So I think there's probably a lot of different factors, but it really is, kind of an unfortunate scenario for everyone involved because, when you see these drop in your inbox, I'm sure your gut instinct is, well, I really wish I could help you. I really
Of
wish
course.
we could
Yeah.
make this happen, but you can't, you just can't.
It wows me, and I think as I've uncovered this and gone deeper is like, to what you're saying is like, yeah, there are some that do a lot of planning. And what I'm finding from just doing this podcast, from talking to some of our good customers, some people that we no longer work with, just the industry, is like when it comes to trade shows, there are some companies, some brands that just execute them very well. They're very organized. They have a good event marketer that's in the seat running them. They have intention. They have strategy. They go to these shows they treat them like a marketing channel, which is what they are. And then you have companies that don't treat them like a marketing channel. They treat them like, like a get together, like a supporting the industry. And I think that starts with leadership. The more that I'm thinking about this, I think it starts with leadership. And I would just encourage I think about leadership at companies is like, these budgets for your trade shows are big. They're big. And if it's like, you need to have, good event marketers in the seat, running the ship correctly, going to get results. There's a big difference in the way the programs I've seen get executed. Some people just show up and some people show up and kind of like make shit happen, which is really, really cool.
Right. And I think that, just as a marketer in general, someone that this is your discipline, this is what you do every day. You look at your full marketing profile. And if you were going to run an ad campaign and spend several hundreds of thousands of dollars placing ads across print and digital and billboard and what have you, you wouldn't prepare for that in a week or two. You just wouldn't. Your event, you wouldn't. I mean, you couldn't. So prioritizing your event presence really should be something, that you think about before arriving. Yes, hopefully you're going to do the business while you're at the show. But it goes back to laying the groundwork. If you haven't done that, then you're not going to walk away with the ROI that you could have. Yeah. And that's, we need to think about it in that way.
Any other tips, tricks, resources, things that you think exhibitors should be looking for and capitalizing from their events, their organizers, their associations?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a really simple one, but when you fill out, the paperwork to be an exhibitor or to receive communications, having the right contact. I cannot tell you how many times people input like an info at address or what have you.
Yeah.
And we're communicating really important information. Yeah. Sometimes logistical information, but sometimes opportunities, to be featured or to be, media's reached out and are looking for a particular exhibitor and we're throwing it out there. So if you have someone who, like you said, can take leadership or ownership or at least be a real person who can connect you to the right person.
Yes.
That's already a huge step in the right direction. And, I kind of like, cringe when I think about so many good things. I always look to do the marketing for everyone. Like if I can help an exhibitor not do their marketing, but, really capitalize on the marketing opportunities at the show, I want to do that, but I have to know who I need to talk to there. So that's a big one. I would say the other one is make a connection with the show directly. My name is on our website as the press coordinator. I'm on LinkedIn. People sometimes inbox me there, send me an email, arrange a phone call. I think that you will find people look at the show organizers and sometimes they are managed by an events company and you're not necessarily speaking. There's scenarios forever. But it's worth it to do the investigating and to see if that's not the case. And if there is an opportunity to speak to someone directly, or at least make a connection with someone, do that because you're going to get the most accurate and up-to-date information, and you're going to see opportunities that maybe you wouldn't see elsewhere. The other thing I would say is engage with the events that you're going to. We all live in the digital age. All events pretty much are active on social media. They're active on their websites. They're participating in podcasts, webinars, what have you. Engage with that and kind of accept that the organizer of the show as a part of the community, because the benefit is you're going to reap the benefit because you're giving them information to build an experience that is better for you. They're doing the work and they're going out and they're facilitating and they're putting everything together. But if you can kind of channel them some of the topics that you want to see or the information that you want to see, they can build those experiences. And again, it goes back to access. They have access to people that maybe you don't, and they can curate that and they can put it in front of you. So don't look beyond, the opportunity to engage in that community conversation with the event directly.
Yeah. And I like what you said back just a while before about marketing yourself, being at the event and then sort of during and beyond it, right? We get a lot of questions on this, like pre-show, during show, post-show marketing, how to do it. Any Any ideas you have on that, being the press officer for
Yeah, I
an
think I'll
organization?
speak to this one from my prior roles where I worked
Yeah.
for, companies as their PR representative. We live in a world where content is king. You need
Yep.
content all the time. So if you're engaging with the content that's being created at the show, created before the show, created as a post show. Like an example of this is, we do a lot of post show recaps and we feature a lot of the exhibitors. We feature a lot of the conversations, the panels that happen. Showing your sales channels that you are an active member of the industry and that you have leaders that are participating in industry events and you're stacking those. And it's not one, check the box and move on. Two, check, conversations don't become irrelevant overnight. These are still conversations that were happening every single day. So if you put time and energy and resource into attending a show, having a conversation at a show, participating in a webinar, participating in, a panel discussion, participating in education, whatever it is, don't let that content die while it still has legs. Use
Yeah.
that. And there's no reason not to. And oftentimes what happens is you'll find yourself being injected into a communication stream or a communication channel with people who are prospective customers, partners, what have you for yourself. And they found you because they have a shared interest in a particular industry event or a particular topic. A lot of our associations, for example, that host our education programming, they do different things. They all do the same industry. They're just working in the same industry and
Yeah.
they're doing something in the industry, but they don't necessarily need to communicate with each other, certainly not on a regular basis. But they find each other with these common ground conversations. And sometimes there's, a mutual benefit that you can take beyond what the event experience was. So if you're already creating the content, you're already, spending the money to be there, you're already giving time out of your schedule to be there, why would you not use it? Why would you not,
Yeah.
recycle it in a way that it can be a conversation that you can have with your sales channels?
I think the simple idea that content is king right now. You're at an event. What a better place to create content. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
create content while you're there, in your booth, at your events, at speaker sessions, out at night, wherever you can.
Yeah.
Host conversations. Like, there's a lot of ways to make content and make good content that I also believe that that's a method of extending the life of your event, right? So you're
Yeah.
investing, might as well have the ability to extend it.
Right. And just to
Good.
quickly hit on that, this
Yeah.
influencer
No, go ahead.
culture is happening across every industry. It's happening in the HVAC industry. You say influencer, but it's just someone who has put time and energy and effort into building a captive audience for the sharing of information. A lot of our exhibitors this cycle, I think, were very smart about understanding the power that could be in that. And they invited a lot of these influencers into their booths to demo their products, and they did video them. They interviewed them.
Smart.
And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that play out on their channels. I'm receiving emails where they have a video. So, you can talk about a product with a brochure or you could do an explainer video. But when you have a real person who's working in the industry who is standing with your product and they're demoing your product or your technology or even just talking about a concept, whatever it is that you're pitching, you've already sort of won an audience in a way that you would never gain their attention without that. So,
Yeah.
that's a really, I think, cool tool to use. And the people who were doing it at the show and were doing it right, I'm seeing that play out now.
Love the influencer piece. I think your industry with AHR, much like my industry to a degree, is a slow moving, slightly older, traditional industry. And the methods for marketing, the methods for content creation, the methods, influencers is one. Like what you're
Right.
saying, people think influencers, they think a teenager dancing on TikTok. That's not what we're
Not
talking
at all.
about at
Right.
all. Yeah, like, you tell people, they're like, oh, what's I'm like, no, that's not what we're talking about. You're talking about somebody that is putting content out into the world in your industry about problems, delivering, like, the killed term is thought leadership, but they're delivering original thought, original content around those things.
Right.
Yeah, it's a good connection there. All right, winding down here. Change. Let's talk about change and kind of the future of events, because I think it's interesting. AHR is a huge show, right? It is. It's big.
Big one.
But yeah, but it's big. But just in general, with events, trade shows, summits, conferences, there's so many names for them.
Yeah.
What kind of major changes do you think we're going to see over the next 5 years, if any, or just even some subtle shifts?
Yeah. Well, if you have all those answers, I'd love to know. No, I think, what we see is it's really like going back to that community aspect. I think that there is nothing bad that can come from educating yourself on your audiences and your shareholders and your stakeholders and what they care about. And looking what their next 5 years, 10 years, or, maybe you can't look that far in the future, even what their next year looks like, and trying to build experiences that add value to that pathway. So, I think traditionally a trade show was or at least the way people would think about it, working on the trade show, it's not the case, but you just put a lot of things on the table and you allow people to come and grab what interests them. And I don't think that that model is going to be viable forever. I think you have to really dive into what each of your stakeholders look like and what they're interested in, and build an experience within the bigger experience specifically for members of that audience. And if you can do that, I think, yes, it's a huge show. Our show, we're talking like, 50,000 people in attendance. That's very overwhelming if you're thinking about it.
Is, yeah. It is.
With that in mind. But if you come with a specific job title or a specific professional role, and you have the materials and the direction for what is actually of interest for you on the show floor, in the education sessions, in the podcast pavilion, events happening outside of the show, then it certainly starts to feel much more manageable. And it feels like a more valued experience because you're not just going and you're grabbing something from the table and hoping that really is going to be something of value to you. You're walking away with, here are the questions that I came with. Here are the answers. My favorite thing is, I call people after the show. I see a lot of them are contractors or businesses that I'll see. So there is a phone number access. And I'll just, DM or call and say, hey, can I just call you and talk about your experience? And I hear time and time again,
nice.
I came to the show with a very specific problem. And it was just maybe I would find it when I was there, or maybe I would just expose myself to a lot of other things and that would be good enough. But I walked away with not just one solution, but like 4 solutions. And for the last year and a half, I've just been kind of putting a Band-Aid on this. And obviously that's costly. It's time consuming. Time is money, money is money. And if you can fix something and you can be directed in such a way that you have like actual options that are specific to what you need on the table, and you can walk away fixing that, who cares what other experiences you have? You have already had a successful show. So I think it's really just kind of moving in that direction, is really kind of looking at what people care about, why they care about it, and making sure that you're serving.
I like that. I love the idea of talking to people afterwards and hearing people saying, hey, I've come with a problem. I've come with something that's burning that I'm trying to, resolve here. I love the answer that you just gave there, because I think like it's kind of not in the way that I see it, but like, the things you're talking about stakeholders and understanding them. And I think it just comes back to like, I keep saying this, I think events need to develop their own identity, what the events is, their own identity, their own personality, right? Because a lot of the future that I see of events is like South by Southwest, Dreamforce, kind of these things that have launched and taken off. Is people do want, the stakeholders want experience. They want meaningful value to be driven, which goes back to what you said. You have to understand your stakeholders so that you can drive meaningful value and an experience that they're like, man, this was great. I'm coming back,
and I'm going to bring my friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly.
So I have closing question on my podcast for you. And that is, what is advice to your younger self?
Oh, goodness. Just in general or trade show specific?
Advice? I like to stay away from the trade show specific. Okay. But sometimes, a lot of people.
Well,
like
I would say as a professional, it's
to,
sign on to be a lifelong learner. I think when I started my career, and maybe this is just me, maybe other people feel this way. I have my college degree and then I have a master's degree. And I always felt like, I was just kind of looking to get to that expert phase of my career and, just realizing very early on that you're never an expert. There's always more to learn. There's always more to do. There's always more ways to grow and evolve. You meet new people, you pivot in your career, you pivot in the world changes. I mean, when I started out, social media was a thing, but working in the B2B space, it was very new. And look at it now. So, now having been, 15 years or so into this, just understanding that I still have a long road ahead of me in my career to be a lifelong learner. And that's a good place to be. Like, I feel like if you ever find yourself feeling too settled or like you're the smartest person in the room or the most informed person in the room, then you're not hanging in the right room. So you need to expand and you need to put yourself in situations where you can learn from people and experiences. So that's, I think, a big one that I would say. And then, if I were talking about trade show specific, I would say it's just think beyond the traditional kind of stereotype of what a trade show or an event or a conference should be. I mean, I think a lot of people, like you touched on this a little earlier, some people look at them as you're going to hang out with people for a few days. Yeah, you're going to see some products on the floor, but think about from the time your attendee or your exhibitor signs on to participate, think about that experience from the time that they've registered and bought into it to when they get home and they actually put some of the things that they've taken away into practice. And that full cycle experience is what my job is to add value points along the way. So, it's bigger than 3 days. I guess is another way to say that.
Nice. Those are both really good. Nicole, thanks for coming on my show. I feel like having talked to you twice now and more in depth that AHR Expo is in really good shape with you as their press officer.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. Thanks for everybody for listening. This is another episode of Event Marketing Redefined, and we will catch you next time. Thank you so much.